up. Anybody have any questions? Just unmute your mic and get right into it.
I have a question. Good evening, Mr. Webb. Your story is amazing. It's great to meet you. I've seen your work. But I want to ask you, and I'm glad that you left the VAR for last, but a few things I want to say is that I'm glad that you brought out that referees are not infallible. I'm glad that you've brought out that we are prone to make mistakes, but build on it. I appreciate that. But with respect to VAR, what if you dare, what is your impression of the way that VAR is used in the EPL?
Well, first of all, I would say that I think certain places are, and were always much more likely to adapt to it than others more easily. So I've got a really easy job compared to my colleagues in England. In the US, in this part of the world, there's an expectation that they'll use video reviews, video replays. They do it in all the other major sports as well. There's a kind of a question mark as to why it didn't happen earlier here. So that makes it easier to accept here. The sport here in the professional level, anyway, MLS is quite a young league still compared to over there where it's been established for years. And it really, like in many other places, it really is, a religion. And if you start changing things, people start to react like this. So it was always going to be more difficult to implement, I think, over there. Albeit people were still quick to criticise when referees made mistakes, and when it was shown on TV later, it's like, oh, why can't the referees have some help to get the right decision? So people wanted that help. Now that help exists, they start to push back a little bit when it starts to interfere, or when there's decisions being made that are really, really close. I think that a couple of things that they did in the Premier League that didn't really help. I think they decided early on that the use of the pitch side monitor wasn't for them. I understand why, because if you're only dealing with clear and obvious situations, why do you need the referee to go to the screen to have a look if it's only clear and obvious? And I asked that same question when I flew here in March 2017. I said to the then general manager, Peter Walton, Pete, why are we using pitch side monitors if we're only dealing with... He said it's because some things are subjective. I said, no, we're dealing with clear and obvious things, not subjective things. And I couldn't get my head around it at first. Then I realised quite quickly that even in the world of clear and obvious, there's still subjectivity around what is or isn't clear and obvious. And if you're the referee and you're being told in your earpiece that something is not right, something needs to change, and you're not seeing it for yourself, you're just being told to give a penalty, that makes it really difficult to manage the players. Really difficult to manage the players, because you're waving away a penalty appeal. It goes out for a throw-in. You have to wait for the check. Then the VAR is saying, okay, it's a penalty, give a penalty. The referee goes, beep, penalty, having not seen it themselves, puts the referee in the same place as the players. And it's like, I don't know why it's a penalty. They're telling me it is, so we've just got to believe them. So much better for the referee to go, make their final decision, and even if they, usually they will agree with the VAR. They should do if the VAR has done the right job. But the VAR could be, off to the left field. So the VAR might be wrong. If the referee, doesn't agree, he can keep the decision. If he does agree, he can at least come back and say, okay, I've seen it. When you see it yourself later, you'll see what I'm seeing. The arm's a long way away from the body. It's a clear penalty. The fans can see what's happening as well. They can follow the process. So I think the use of the screens is important, in my opinion. And then the other thing is, just in terms of the offside line, that's the other thing that's caused a lot of contention, a lot of issue, is the fact that you're taking away goals that otherwise would have normally stood. Goals that are being disallowed for this much offside that would have stood previously, because they weren't decisions that the assistant would get involved in because they give benefit the doubt to the attacking team. They're now being disallowed. And I think that we'll see, and I had a conversation earlier on a Soccer X panel this morning. I think we'll see the law changing to reshift the balance back towards the attackers. I think you'll probably see offside being penalised when there's no part of the attacking player which is in line with the defender. In other words, your back foot can be in line, even though you're leaning forward, you're ahead of the defender. I think we'll get to a stage where that's the only time you'll get penalised. Don't get me wrong, you're still going to have a point where you have to make a judgment with the back foot. There's still a line that has to be made. Was that back foot overlapping or not? But at least you're going to capture a lot of situations where goals can be given that wouldn't have otherwise been given. In fact, goals are going to be given that otherwise would have been not given previously. So, but at least you're shifting it back towards the attacker. And I think in some ways the Premier League have tried to be too accurate, if you like. That sounds weird, but they've used these lines and in our opinion here, we've said the assistants are really good at what they do. Just leave it to the assistant unless it's clearly wrong. But they've got a media over there. The media are going to put lines across. They're going to analyse it. They're going to say, if you've got technology, you've got to use it properly to these fine margins. So they're in a bit of a catch-22 over there because of the culture. So I think we'll see a law change which will help them not take away these goals for these fine margins. And the only goals that will get taken away is where the flag stays down, but there was no overlapping of the attacker and the defender. So in effect, the attacker is a long way offside, and that will redress the balance. But at least they're moving towards using the screens. And the other thing they've got to do as well, the last thing they've got to do, they've got to manage people's expectations. Don't say this is going to capture everything. This is just going to capture the really clear things. And what I don't want to see here, at least, is referees stood in the middle for 3 minutes like this. If you're having to look at something for 3 minutes, it's not going to be clear and obvious. Just say check complete. People will accept it. They've accepted decisions by referees for a long time. As long as you've managed their expectations that it's not going to be perfect, then at least we're not ruining the game.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
VAR, my understanding of it, basically back in the day, it was for good mouth technology. I remember a game, I think about 6 years ago, Manchester United was playing Tottenham, and VAR weren't in place then. And for good mouth technology, yes. But for me, I feel, I may be wrong, that especially in the English Premier League, that the VAR has taken the human side out of football, meaning there are some games that I've seen games where the referee bent over like 3 or 4 times. Now that's my opinion. What do you think?
Hi, Dwayne. Thanks for the question. I think you're right. Goal line technology has been accepted totally. I mean, it's like, it's something that is, okay, we saw one situation at Aston Villa against Sheffield United last year where it didn't capture the ball over the line. But that's the only time that we can remember. I remember refereeing with it myself back in 2013. I remember I refereed a game between Fulham and Newcastle. Newcastle thought they'd scored. No, sorry, Fulham thought they'd scored. It looked like it was over to the naked eye, but there was nothing on the watch. The fans are cheering. They think it's a goal. And then suddenly on the screen, within a few seconds, there's a picture and an animation. The camera zooms down and there's this much of the ball over the line. And it says no goal. And people go, oh, but they believe it. They believe it because it's quick and it's immediate. I think with offside, it's different. The problem with offside is that, those fine margins people would accept if it was automated, if it was immediate. So if there's a system that is brought in where the assistant referee gets told automatically that the player is in offside position, the assistant only has to make the judgment, did the player interfere with play, interfere with an opponent or get an advantage, then we could very quickly disallow goals rather than allowing goals to stand 2 minutes later, then disallow the goal for this amount. We're disallowing goals for this amount with goal line technology and nobody cares. They believe in it. So if we make it quicker and make it more automated in the moment, then we don't get to a situation where players celebrate. If a ball goes in the back of the goal and the flag goes straight up because he's had an automated message saying that player's offside, then that will be much more readily accepted. And even if then we go to a replay and an animation shows the player was this much offside, people will say fine. The problem now is that we're seeing the lines being placed, we're seeing goals being taken back 2 minutes after they've been scored. I agree, it feels like interference, doesn't it? It feels like it's not a game anymore, And even though it might be correct, it's not what VAR was brought in for. VAR, if that was the only problem in the game, that goals were being scored that might have been slightly offside, we wouldn't have spent millions on VAR. VAR exists because of Thierry Henry handling the ball, because of Maradona handling the ball, because of Nigel de Jong kicking Lonzo in the chest. For these really clear errors that, you can see now. I was in Germany until recently, over New Year, and I was watching the German Cup between Kiel and Bayern Munich. And the first goal was scored, no VAR until the third round. This is a second round game. Goal is scored, and the camera shows the player is 2 yards offside. No VAR. And it's like, why is there no VAR? Things like that, clear and obvious, you need VAR for. Not for these minutiae. That's the problem that we're facing at the minute. So I think we'll see a change of the law that will allow more advantage to the attacking team. We'll see some automation of the technology, which will mean it's quicker and more credible, more acceptable. For now, I'll be honest, I'm quite happy with MLS not using lines, because that means I can say to my guys, the assistant will make a decision. You look at it on the camera like you guys do at home. If it comes off the screen at you that it's obviously wrong, recommend a review. The referee will look at it and say, yeah, I agree with you. That player is clearly offside with the naked eye. Take the goal away. And we're not messing around with little tiny margins. But we're lucky to be able to do that because, we don't have a media and a TV that wants to analyse things in really fine detail. And it works for us.
I have a question that's on the chat. Is VAR's job to insist or assist in getting the calls right?
It's definitely only there to assist. Don't get me wrong. It's an interesting dynamic because every time there's a video review, the VAR is saying, by virtue of the fact that they've intervened, that they believe that individual official believes a clear error has been made. That is what they are saying by recommending a review. They're saying, in my opinion, and I'm just a human being, but in my opinion, there's nothing I can find to support your decision. So the referee then goes to the screen with that in his mind. However, here in MLS, we had 15 or 20 situations last year where the referee looked at the screen and said, well, thank you, Mr. VAR. I appreciate your assistance, but I actually don't agree that I've made a clear error. I think I've made the right call. And at least on 12 occasions, the referee was right. So the VAR got overly involved when they shouldn't have done, because they're not, it's just an opinion at the end of the day. Don't get me wrong, on 85 occasions, they got it right. They intervened at the right time, but they're definitely there as an assistance. In many leagues, for the more factual situations, like offside, like ball in and out of play, like inside, outside the penalty area, it does become more of an insistence because the referee doesn't go to the screen. They just accept the information over the earpiece. It's considered factual. It's considered a waste of time to go to the screen because you're only going to see an image of, the ball over the line or the foul taking place outside. So why do you need somebody to second check that? That's the opinion of the Bundesliga, the Premier League. Many leagues do it that way. We, like I said earlier, we don't. We still send the referee to the screen for a final check off of the situation. And yes, it takes about 50 seconds to do that, but it does give the referee the chance to say to the players, look, I've seen it. And it does also assist a little bit with the way we do offside because we don't use lines. So it needs somebody's interpretation. And we just check that the VAR didn't make a crazy interpretation of what they're seeing. But it should definitely be assistance, not insistence.
What advice would you have? Because we have a number of these officials here that are striving to get on the FIFA list. What advice would you have for them, first of all, trying to get there and then to maintain the status of being on that list?
I think, first of all, it's important to really stay as a good human being. Be humble, be receptive to advice. Don't feel like you've made it just because you're the biggest, most successful referee in your region or in your area. Always treat people in a really respectful way. I think these things are really important, by the way, I do. It doesn't mean you can't be confident or even have some form of ego. That's important on the field to sell yourself and your decisions. But being fair and being fearless, but being reasonable as well, I think it's important to and being genuine as well. Being genuine is really important. Yes, you have to sometimes act out on the field in terms of, those big decisions are the ones where you've got to push your shoulders back, grow in your stature, show that you're in charge, show with your facial expressions, your body language, that the decision is not open for debate, but then recognize the time when it's right to show a softer side, to show that you're a human being. Being like this in your approach to management is really important. Being that strong character when the game needs you to be strong. Not debating every decision. I see some of our young referees coming through on MLS. They want to talk about every decision, and players don't want that. Players don't believe in the referee that wants to speak all the time. And I say, look, there's times when it's right and proper to engage with the player and to show your human side. But there's also a time when it's right to show real strength. You're in charge. You're not debating that decision. Players will gain confidence in and trust in your ability to manage the game when they see that side of you. And some of the greatest referees the world's ever seen. I mean, Kalina, for example, is often cited as the greatest ever because he is, because he had the ability to do that. He had the ability to flex his approach from being that big, Google-eyed, sort of like scary individual to somebody who was much softer. And recognizing when to do that, it's important to get the trust of people. So I think it starts with being a good person, I think, and recognizing how to manage people. And I think also, never thinking that you know it all, always continuing to work hard. Don't go into a game like Man U Liverpool thinking, oh, I'll ease my way into this game, and suddenly you hit with a decision that can change your career. Always do the bits and pieces well. Keep investing in that personal bank. Keep on top of the laws of the game. Keep treating your team properly so you get the best out of them. All those sort of things are important, I think. And all the things I've talked about in the call.
You mentioned, you started out talking about the uniqueness of the guys that you work with as a team. How important is it to have a team and constantly work with those people to ensure that you build that relationship?
I personally believe in the creation of teams. I know it's not always possible. On this side of the fence now, it's not always possible to put the same people together for various reasons, availability reasons and what have you. But if it is possible, it's something I think that should be used as much as possible so that you can build up that almost telepathy. Even if you are working together on a regular basis, though, I would still encourage you to do the basics right in terms of the pre-match preparation. So everybody is reminded of their specific roles on the day. And then if you're not able to work with the same people, then, just create that team ethic from the very first moment the assignment is made, when you're making contact with each other. The referee is the leader of the team, but the referee has to understand that it is a genuine team effort. And it's not about the referee and somebody just helping them not make mistakes. It's about everybody coming together to understand what their part of the team is. And really to empower people to make decisions. We were looking at we had our pre-season camp this weekend, and we looked at we're trying to understand what best practice is. And we're saying it's not just about making the right decision. We have some people who think it's right that the assistant shouldn't flag in certain scenarios, but sometimes an assistant referee not flagging when the team expects that referee to flag, that assistant to flag, even though the decision is right, because the assistant communicates on the radio to the referee that there's been a handball. If the flag doesn't go up, even that correct decision can lead to dissent and lack of trust in the referee team, because they believe that the assistant's not done the job he's sent there to do. They don't trust the assistant referee. So suddenly the correct decision can create division and lack of trust. So again, empowering people to make decisions in the right place in the right time is important to enhance that credibility of the entire team. So teamwork's really crucial. I'm a big advocate of working together as often as you can where that's possible. And if it's not possible, still doing everything you can to build that team ethos before the game. Treat your team right. Tell them what the responsibilities are. Empower them to do the job.
Anyone else? Questions? It's open.
Yeah, question, Earl.
So, Webb, have you ever had a time in your career where you've had a game that was really bad and you've stayed in a slump? And how long has that slump been?
Good question, Tashian. Yeah, a good question. Yeah, I have. I think every season has seen periods where I've been doing really well, really in the groove. And then I've had spells in every season where I've had a difficult game and then another one on the back of it as well. I think the biggest slump I ever had was right at the end of my career, 2014 in the Premier League. I knew I was finishing. I wanted to finish on a high, putting pressure on myself. And it's really really strange actually. If you were sad enough to go on the internet and search my games in my career, if you look at 2013, 2014 season, the games that took place in the Premier League after the new year in 2014 to the end of the season were pretty low-level games. And yet in the Champions League, I was doing the highest games. Quarter-final, Atletico Madrid, Barcelona. Semi-final, Real Madrid against Bayern Munich. Big games in Europe. And yet in the Premier League, I was doing really no games involving the top six. None. Because each time I was going into a Premier League game, I was putting pressure on myself. I'd made a couple of errors. Suddenly I was going into games thinking it's probably going to be an error in this game, and there was. And I was then afraid to make a decision. And I couldn't quite put my finger on why that was. I think it was because I knew I was coming to the end of my career. I was desperate to finish on a high, and I put pressure on myself, I think. And sometimes you've just got to sort of like take it a game at a time, relax, trust in your judgment, don't think too hard, don't focus on goals too much. We had a referee last year here who really suffered with a bit of confidence crisis. And, I said, listen, just take it every game at a time. Just go out there, enjoy it. Don't focus on, he was desperate to get in the playoffs, and he had a good start to the season. He could see that he was likely to get in the playoffs, and then he just put too much pressure on himself. And, if you're good at what you do, you'll come out of it. You'll come out of the slump. But to do that, you've got to stop focusing on the goal and just focus on refereeing the game. Think about enjoying refereeing the game, doing the basics in that 90 minutes. And having a slump is nothing to be afraid of. It will happen. It'll come. And it came every season with me. If it does, take a breath. Just take a breath, have a chat, and then just go into the game and take the pressure off. Not easy, but if you're good at what you do, if you've got to where you've got to, and you've maintained your level, you're good enough to be there, and you'll come through it.
Dennis? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So, Howard, as a person that's responsible in charge of refereeing in Bermuda, one of our biggest, I guess you would say, Achilles heel was fitness. How did you, as a referee on the FIFA list, motivate yourself to continue to train and do what you needed to do to ensure that you stayed in tip-top, condition? Because that's one thing, especially now with COVID. How do you motivate people or yourself to say, this is what I need to do because I want to remain on this list?
I realized quite early, Princeton, that my fitness levels when I first got into the professional game were not where they needed to be. I realized that I wasn't able to get around the field with the ease I needed to be able to focus on the decision making. It was a real wake-up call. It was my first ever game in the professional game, and I realized quite early that wasn't going to be enough. And then I realized as well that there's more than just fitness. There's the way that you look as well. You can be fit enough, but if you don't look athletic, I look at some of the colleagues in the professional game who are clearly fit enough to get around the field, but they're still carrying a bit of weight and they don't look athletic. Our referees here are pretty athletic, actually, in MLS, and they look the part. And that's important, to look the part, to look like you belong, because it's more than just making the right call. It's how you sell the call. It's the acceptance of the players. And it's a package. It's the decision. It's your body language. It's the way that you look. And I knew that if I didn't stay on top of my training and my diet, I would very quickly put weight on. I would potentially find myself not able to get into the position that I want to get into. And I knew it was competitive. I knew that I had Clattenburg coming up on the rails. I knew that I had Martin Atkinson trying to get to the next tournament. I knew that Mike Dean wanted to referee the North London Derby every year, but I wanted it as well. And I knew that if I didn't train in the way that I needed to keep the weight off, to look the part, and to be able to get into the position I needed to get into through agility and endurance, then I wasn't going to get to that level. And actually, something, there was better referees than me. There were people who were just more naturally gifted at making decisions than I was. But fitness wasn't anything that needed natural ability. I didn't need any God-given talent to be able to train. I just needed the desire to go out and do it. And, that's a decision. That's a decision that I take. I can either choose not to do it or I can choose to do it. I don't need any special gift. I just need the will to go out and train. So I did. I had good support from a sports scientist. I changed my training as I got older. I did less high-intensity training. I did more resistance training, more weight training to keep the body fat down, maybe more more compact. It made me able to look fitter as well. So all those things helped as well by having specialist help as well. But it comes down to desire. It comes down to that will to prepare to win. And I wanted that North London derby more than Mike Dean. Well, maybe I didn't. I don't know. But I wanted to get to these games and not be passed over because I wasn't looking in shape or wasn't fit enough.
Good evening. Oh, you go ahead, sir.
Okay. Good night, sir. I am asking a question on just behalf of the players and now I'm a coach. One of the things that what do you think of the referee's assistant not putting his flag up when it's like an obvious offside? What was the logic behind that? Waiting until the next phase or something. What's the logic behind that? In my estimation, it seems like somebody who got a broken leg and then the referee's assistant puts his flag up. What was the logic behind FIFA or making that decision of the referee's assistants having to wait until he puts his flag up?
It's a really good question, Dennis, and it's something that we are still wrestling with now. We're still working out what's the best way to do this, because you're right, when you delay the flag, you open up a risk of a collision that wouldn't be there if the flag went up straight away. The reason we delay the flags, the offside flag, is because we know that assistants don't always call offside correctly. Sometimes they make mistakes. And now that we've got video technology in place, those mistakes can be rectified. But they can only be rectified if the game is allowed to continue, because as soon as the flag goes up and the whistle goes, the game stops. And that goal-scoring opportunity is cancelled there and then. And we'll never know what was going to happen. But what we do know is that a goal-scoring opportunity was taken away by a flag, and on the replay, it's shown to be an incorrect flag. So the thought process, the rationale is that the assistant referee, by delaying the flag, allows the play to continue to its conclusion, then signals, because they still have to make a decision offside or not, they signal to say, okay, I believe it was offside. I've kept my flag down in case I was wrong, but now I'm telling you what my decision would have been if we didn't have VAR. In other words, if there's no VAR, I would have flagged it straight away. But because there is, now we've got a tool to capture errors. I've kept it down. That gives the VAR a chance to check it. And if my flag is wrong, we can give the goal. And I've not impacted anything, but I'm telling you it's offside in my opinion. Now, we tell our assistants only do that, only delay the flag in certain circumstances. First of all, if the player is clearly offside by the size of a house, don't delay the flag. Because what chance is that you're going to be wrong? There's no chance. So just stick it up. Whistle, done. No chance of that leg breaking collision. So if it's clearly wrong, clearly offside, stick it up. If it's close, if it's really close and you're just not sure if it's offside or not, we've always said keep your flag down, full stop. Just keep it down. VAR, no VAR, doesn't matter. If it's really close, give the benefit of the doubt to the attacking team. Keep your flag down, let the attack continue, allow the goal to stand, never stick your flag up. That's a goal. Yep, and if the VAR will check it and tell you if you're wrong or not. The ones that are more difficult are the ones where the assistant referee thinks it's offside, and without VAR would have flagged it straight away. The assistant referee thinks it's offside, but it's not clearly offside. There's a little chance they could be wrong. So in those situations, we say delay your flag, but we still want you to flag, because if we've not got a camera in line, we have to trust your judgment. We have to trust your opinion that it's offside, and sometimes we don't have a camera in line. So if the assistant thinks, well, it's offside in my opinion, but I know it's fairly close, but I'm going to let it play out and give a goal, and then I'm never going to raise my flag because, I'll let the VAR do its job. But actually, the VAR might not have the tool to tell if it is offside or not. So then we have to trust the assistant referee decision. And we also say, if it's wide of goal, if it's not near, if it's not a real opportunity to score, stick the flag up as well. So we're minimising those chances of a collision. But that's the reason why we do it, to open up that window to allow mistakes that are important mistakes to be captured. And don't forget, we're dealing with a sport that's really low scoring. It's not like basketball, 115 plays 113. We're talking about 1-0s, 1-1s, 2-1s, 0-0s. Scoring a goal in soccer means a lot. And we have to, therefore, in our opinion, give every opportunity for correct goals to be allowed to stand. But I accept your point totally, Dennis. There's an issue around risk of a collision that wouldn't otherwise exist. And I guess the decision that the game has to make, the game at large, is that a risk worth taking to allow that window to be open to capture mistakes or not? And I guess we'll find that out over time. We do research about how many times there is a collision. There's not that many, but there are some. There are some. And I guess it's something that we'll have to make a decision on collectively when we've got more evidence whether it's a risk worth taking.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
We have another question. Yeah.
Mr. Webb, thank you again for sharing your knowledge. I have a two-part question. First one being, at the height of your officiating, what was a standard 7 days? What did your schedule look like? A 7-day schedule, for instance, and what's the most games you've had to officiate in that 7-day, 1 week period?
I'll answer that one first. For the first part of my professional career, I got onto the Premier League in 2003. For the first 5 years, I also combined part-time police work. I'd been full-time as a police officer. Before that, I went down to part-time, 20 hours a week. And then after 5 years, I took a 5-year career break with no police work so I could focus on the refereeing and the international scene and what have you. So just taking the police work out of it for now. In the period when I was a full-time referee only, I would generally do a game at the weekend, Saturday or Sunday. Quite often, a midweek game, which was either a Champions League game, a Europa League game, a full international, or a Premier League game. Not always, but most weeks had a game. If it was a Champions League game, it would be flying out on a Tuesday, game on Wednesday, fly back Thursday for a game back in the Premier League on a Saturday, and then training as well squeezed in. So in training terms, we always did a match day plus one recovery session. We always did a match day minus one preparation session. And then depending on what the schedule was like for the week, if there was no games in midweek, we would do 2 harder sessions. One would be a weight session and one would be a speed endurance session or a HI session. So usually 4 training sessions a week, recovery, match day prep, which was like speed, agility, 1 weight session, at least one, I usually did 2, I squeezed another one in somewhere, and 1 speed endurance session. And that would be what my week would tend to look like. Additionally, in the Premier League, and the same here in the US, we got together every 2 weeks for 3 days. So if it was a camp week, we'd do a game on a Saturday, I'd go home Sunday and do a recovery session. Monday, we'd drive to camp, which was in the middle of the country in England. We'd have classroom sessions Monday night. Tuesday morning, we'd train together. Tuesday afternoon, classroom sessions. Wednesday morning, train together again. It might be in the gym doing some weights or something, and then drive home. Thursday might be a rest day. Friday would be a match day minus one prep. I would say always make sure you do your recovery session, whatever recovery works for you, be it swimming, be it low intensity jogging, whatever your preference is, and then always do a match day minus one prep session. Speed, agility, nice 25-minute sharp session, and then try to squeeze in, if you can, 1 good session per week, which is speed endurance or HI, and 1 weight session if you can, like a resistance session.
Okay. We have a question that was posted on the chat. Similar to modern day players, should mental training be mandatory for referee training? What have you seen around the world when it comes to that aspect?
Good question. Refereeing is definitely a mental discipline, in my opinion. You need to go into the game feeling confident, with your head clear, not thinking about previous mistakes, not thinking about what's written in the newspaper, not worrying about being a Man United fan, allegedly. It's really important to be mentally strong. I've mentioned that a few times. And I think there's a place for sports psychology. But I understand it's not for everybody. But I think that personally there's a role to play to be able to speak to somebody, talk about the way that you're feeling, put things into perspective, I think is important. And there's some mental techniques that are good for the group setting. And I think that, there's some benefit from having some techniques shared with you as a group. But I think also it's important to have individual opportunities for those who want it to be able to use a sports psychologist. And it's something that we use here, I think, in terms of the mental preparation. Because let's be honest, I mean, okay, the physical side, we can talk about it. You don't need to be special to be physically fit. You just need to be determined. But this game is playing with your confidence all the time. You know, I've talked about players trying to make you make mistakes. You're making decisions in the here and the now based on, you know, the viewing angle that you've got. And sometimes you make errors, and errors can be impactful. When we make an error, it impacts us, but it impacts one of the teams as well. When a team makes an error, it only impacts the team. And the other thing is, we can have a great game. We're a bit like a goalkeeper. We can have a great game, make 20, 30, 40 great decisions. We make one bad decision in the last minute, and that's what you're remembered for. A bit like a goalkeeper, makes 10 great saves, throws one in the last minute, that's what he's remembered for. As an attacker, you can have 10 sitters that you put over the bar, but you score the winner in the last minute, you're a hero. So it's stacked against you a little bit. You've got to be really tough as a ref, really mentally tough, and I think there's a place to play for sports psychology.
Yeah. Anyone else?
I have another one.
Sure.
Have you ever been in a game where the game's going good, and other than the World Cup final, the game's going good, you feel like you're getting a decision, so obviously your confidence is rising, and then you see a decision that you can make, but you decide to manage it, and then all hell breaks loose. How did you bounce back from that?
It's a really good question. I know exactly what you're talking about. The game's going great. You're seeing things big. Your body language is big. And then something happens. And there's an appeal. And it's a strong appeal. But you've not got the gut feeling. You don't have enough evidence. You don't give it. And suddenly that absolutely dominates your thoughts, doesn't it? That decision then dominates your thoughts. And if you ever spoke to my dad, he would come to the games quite a lot. And he would tell me, he said, I could see that in the 65th minute, your body language just went. He could tell that something was on my mind. He could tell that I was thinking about that decision. And it's a really tough thing to put out of your mind when you think that you might have made an error. It's a bit easier now, I guess, with VAR, because if it's clear and obviously wrong, somebody will tell you, hopefully. But in my day, there was no VAR. So I had to believe in what I saw. And, you know, I'd love to say, you know something, Tashin, I put it out of my mind. I was able to run right through it and keep my body language strong. But if I'm honest, it wasn't really the case. It would be on my mind. Looking back on my career now, what I can say is that, yeah, some of those were mistakes. Sometimes that feeling that I'd made a mistake that caused my shoulders to drop, my body language to go down, they were mistakes. They were. But you know something? An awful lot of the time, when I watched it back later, it wasn't a mistake. And yet my shoulders still dropped and my body language still went down and my energy levels went onto the decision, and I wasted energy worrying about a decision that wasn't a mistake. And even those that were mistakes didn't kill my career. I still went on to referee 298 Premier League games. I still refereed the Champions League final, the World Cup final, even though I made those mistakes. So they ain't going to kill you. You know what I mean? Going to seasons expecting to make some mistakes. If you remember a referee called Graham Poll was the top dog on the Premier League when I got onto the Premier League. Yeah. If you remember, he showed the 3 yellow cards to the Croatian player in the World Cup in 2006. It's a shame that he's remembered for that mistake because he did so much more than that in 1,000 games. He's remembered he made lots of mistakes like we did. He's remembered for that one because that was on the biggest stage and it was an extraordinary mistake. He's not remembered for any other mistakes. Mistakes to be remembered for have to be of that magnitude. Other mistakes aren't remembered. We all make them. Don't worry about them. Expect to make them. And to be fair to Graham, he said to me, it was before he made that mistake, but he said to me, look, he said, I go into seasons expecting to make 3 or 4 big mistakes in a year. I expect it. And when it happens, I don't panic. I don't panic because I know it's going to happen. It's going to happen to all of us. So don't worry about it. Don't expect to be perfect. Yes, learn from it, look to improve, etc. But don't expect not to make errors. They're going to happen. Try to keep your body language strong. I know it's going to happen. The only thing what I would say as well is don't give too much benefit of the doubt to players. I can remember I refereed a game, an FA Cup game. It was Wigan Athletic against West Ham United. And West Ham had a player called Thomas Repka, Czech Republic international, playing for them. And I'd cautioned him in the first half. And in the second half, I could tell that the Wigan players were trying to lure him into making a second yellow card offence. And And I thought, don't forfeit, Howard, don't forfeit. But then Thomas Repka put a challenge in that should have been a second yellow. And I decided not to send him off. I decided to manage him. And as soon as the game kicked off, I thought, what have I done? Shit, I should have sent him off. I thought, I hope I get another chance. I hope he puts another stupid foul in, then I can send him off. Or I hope that we can go on to win the game, because then it won't be a talking point. And the next time the ball went out, Howard, substitution, and you know what's going to happen. Repka's going to be taken off, because the coach knows that he's being given too much of a chance by me. And then from that point on, my shoulders are down. I'm thinking, oh my goodness. And you know what's going to happen. West Ham are going to win the game. The sub that comes on scores the game, winning goal. So again, don't take too much responsibility from the players. If a player does something stupid and was on a yellow card, don't take that responsibility onto your shoulders. Don't be left thinking, I hope that he doesn't score the winning goal. If you're thinking about whether to send somebody off or not, if you think, well, if he scores the winning goal, is that going to be an issue for you? If you're thinking it is, he should have been sent off. Or he should be sent off.
Kevin, do you have a question?
Hi, good night, Mr. Webb. Before I ask my question, I just want to extend thanks to Mr. Williams and by extension, the Bermuda Football Association for allowing me to join the call tonight. It's been really informative so far, and I've really enjoyed the experience. My question goes towards your talk about teamwork earlier, where you would be able to do major competitions with Malarkey and Can as your assistant referees. I'm the FIFA assistant referee for Barbados, and unfortunately, we haven't had a center referee since 2018. So when I have been doing games, I've been doing it with referees from other countries. So my question basically is just to get some insight as to what your pre-game instructions or what your expectations for assistant referees would have been prior to having two dedicated, basically, assistant referees to travel with.
I would always have, it's a good question, because, even with Darren and Mike, by the way, we'd still go through the same pre-match instructions. It just helped us get in the right zone, if you like. I actually sat down and prepared a specific set of instructions going through the different scenarios in the game. Focus mainly around specific areas where I know I'm going to need the assistant to help me out. When the assistant is better placed than I am to make that decision, and focusing really on how the communication is going to work, whether you've got comm systems or not, buzzer flags in the first instance. It was an awful lot around communication. How am I going to receive the information that I need from the official who's better placed than I am? How are we going to deliver that information to each other so that when we show our opinion to the players, we do it in a unified way? We do it in a way that's going to enhance our credibility and not diminish it. That was most of my focus was around communication, around who's going to go first, who's going to lead first, who's going to, indicate publicly the decision that we've got. So I think most of the pre-match instructions has to be around that element, around communication. When you've got a situation where there's two pieces of information that need to be brought together on an offside, for example, the assistant can see the offside position. I'm making a judgment about interference with an opponent. Who played the ball? Was it a defender or was it an attacker? All those sort of things are the things that we've talked through. When information has to be shared, when it has to be brought together, or when we have to show our decision, our opinion publicly, who's going to lead. So I think, if you've got a referee who's giving you pre-match instructions but isn't focusing on those points, I think you're within your right to ask that question, in terms of communication. Things as well, like and to make the assistant aware as well, by the way, if it's clear that there's a player offside who's close to the goalkeeper, and the assistant is going to ask me whether or not he was in the line of sight of the goalkeeper, you know something? I can't help. I really can't tell you. I can't tell you because I'm not in line either, and I'm watching for handball or a late tackle on the guy that's made the shot. So really, let's not talk about line of sight. Let's talk about proximity. Let's talk about impact on the goalkeeper as opposed to line of sight. Those type of things are really important, I think, to understand beforehand, so that when it happens in the stress of the moment, we're able to come to the right decision. But you're within your right to ask the question if the referee's not covered it, about those communication aspects, about who's going to flag. Sorry, when you're going to flag, and in what areas of the field you're expected to lead.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Webb, you've given a lot of information, for food for thought. You shared your experiences within your refereeing career, even the troubled times. I think a lot of people, when they heard you were going to be on this, would have reflected back on some of those things. But to hear you talk about it is kind of refreshing, because when you faced with challenges, if you don't express them or talk about them, they tend to mount up. But the fact that you've had the opportunity to reflect on them, I think is a good thing. And at this time, I'll ask the president to close us out here.
Thanks, Phil.
It's good if you unmute yourself. I just want to really congratulate the chairman on his Excellence in Action series. This is part 4, and I think it's been fantastic. It's been captivating. I've only ever officiated in one match, and it was an experience in itself. But I really enjoyed some of the finer points and tidbits that you offered the audience. So I want to say thank you again, and thank you for spending your time with our little 21 square mile island and our little 65,000 people. I'm sure that you have inspired some of our match officials here. So thank you, and thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for the opportunity, guys. Good luck for the rest of this season and the rest of the year. Stay safe with this crazy pandemic that we're all facing and getting through. Enjoyed spending my Monday evening with you guys, and I wish you well. Hopefully, I'll get over to the island at some point. I know it's a beautiful place. You're very lucky to live there, and I'll be looking out for that opportunity to bring my wife at some point to come over, and we'll say hi in person. But in the meantime, thanks for making me feel welcome, feeling part of your group, and I hope you feel it's been a couple of hours well spent. It's been my pleasure.
Yeah. You're 2 hours away, and you're all welcome.